Hello, it's Medium Jenny Lee. I'm here with the next book discussion for the Raw Contact Volume 1. And we're on session 19, which means this is video number 20. This session is not quite as long as the previous ones, but still lengthy, so let's get started. Okay, so Don's got a fairly long question here. I would like to fully investigate through questioning the mechanism of evolution in order to allow those interested individuals to participate in their own evolution. It seems to me that a good place to start would be the transition from the second to the third density, in detail the evolution of third densities of the Earth, paying attention to the mechanisms which help or hinder the evolution. So this is going to be the topic of this session and the next session. And that's as far as I've read, so I don't know. It seems like it'll probably continue after that even, because we haven't, even at the end of session 20, they haven't made it through all the time yet. So what I would like to know first is, do all entities make a transition from the second to third density, or are there some entities who have never gone through this transition? Within the context of this illusion, you may say that there are some which do not transfer from one particular density to another, for the continuum is finite. In the understanding which we have of the universe or creation as one infinite being, its heart beating as alive in its own intelligent energy, it merely is one beat of the heart of this intelligence from creation to creation. In this context, each and every entity of consciousness has, is, will, experiencing each and every density. So some don't make a transition, but because we're all one, everybody goes through all the densities because we're all one being. Is the second density being what you call an animal? There are three types of second density entities which become inspirited. The first is animal. That's the most predominant. The second is vegetable or trees. Trees, I love that. These entities are capable of giving and receiving enough love to become individualized. Trees. Trees can give and receive love to become individualized. That makes me want to go out and hug a tree, like right now. The third category is mineral. And this is interesting because Charity and I were just having a conversation about places. She has a specific place that calls to her in a positive way, and I had a specific place that caused me to feel doom and gloom. So here we go. Occasionally a certain location or place becomes energized to individuality through the love it receives and gives in relationship to a third density entity, which is in relationship to it. That's the least common transition. But clearly it happens. Clearly it happens that a place can give and receive love if third density entities have given it enough. Or in my case, it might have been the opposite. All right. So when this transition from second to third takes place, how does the entity become inspirited? Entities do not become inspirited. They become aware that they're inspirited. Remember, everything has a bit of the original creation in it. Everything has a bit of spirit in it. Everything has a bit of the original thought of the intelligent infinity, but it's whether they become aware of it. This awareness is this awareness is that which is awareness that of, good Lord. Maybe I need some more coffee. This awareness is that which is awareness of that already given. So it's an awareness that they have it, that was already there. The self-awareness comes from within. The catalyst of certain experiences or understanding. It's the upward spiraling of the consciousness. Remember, we have this upward spiraling energy in our planet, and perhaps I guess also in our solar system. that's going to go upward regardless of whether we're ready to or not. And so becoming self-aware that you have this spirit is the what's happening here. You may then see that there is an inevitable pull towards the eventual realization of self. So because we're always spiraling up to the next density anyway, it's going to happen eventually. So then Dawn asks, then after the transition into the third density, they would be in human form? Correct. Taking your planetary sphere as an example. So on our planet, if an entity reaches third density, they become a human after the harvest. But that's confusing because I understand for an animal and a tree, eventually they pass on, they're not going to live, their physical forms are going to live forever and they can be harvested. But what about a location? A place wouldn't necessarily pass on. So would they just stay? That's an excellent question, Dawn. How come you didn't answer? You didn't ask this question. I want to know. Okay. Next question. When the first second density entities became third on this planet, was this with the help of the transfer of beings from Mars, or were there second density entities that evolved into third with no outside influence? There was some second density entities which made the graduation to the third. So they were of Earth and they made it to third density all by themselves. Good job, good job. Others of your planetary second density joined the third density cycle due to the harvesting efforts by the same sort of sending a vibrational aid as those of the confederation send you now. The communication was, however, telepathic rather than telepathic vocal or telepathic written due to the nature of the secondary beings. So the confederation had to send information and help just telepathically because there is no language or written language. Who sent aid to the second density beings? The Confederation of Planets of the Infinite Creator, of course. This is a simplification in order to ease the difficulty of understanding among your peoples. We even hesitate to use the word understanding, but it's close to our meaning. So the Confederation also aided in the second density or third density. We must qualify correctness in this query. A portion of the Confederation which is not working with third density but finds its aid best used in other harvests, that is, the second density harvest, is responsible for the aid in these harvests. So the Confederation entities that help beings transition from first density to second density were the ones that ended up helping these entities along, that eventually passed on to the third density, that weren't from Mars. The Confederation, as we have stated previously in these sessions, is composed of many of these other densities, and your own density within your planetary sphere and within the inner or angelic realms. Each of these entities developing a mind-body sphere complex, and then developing a social memory complex, and then dedicating this social memory complex to the singular service of the one creator may join the Confederacy. Whew, lots of words, Ra, lots of words. Okay. Confederation is composed of lots of different entities that are of different densities, even including third. Some are in our planetary sphere, some are on Earth, some are in the inner planes of Earth, some are in the angelic realms. Good to know that those really exist. And they have made it, some of them have made it to the social complex, memory complex. Did this second density to third density transition take place 75,000 years ago? Correct. Where did the second density beings get physical vehicles of a third density type to incarnate into? There were among those upon the second density plane those forms which, when exposed to third density vibrations, became third density, as you call your sound vibration human entities. So it's like just moving into the third density the body becomes human. Because it has to. Because the second density body doesn't have the mechanisms to function at the third density level. That is, there is a loss of body hair, the clothing of the body to protect it. So yes, so loss of body hair, the changing of the structure of the neck and jaw and forehead in order to allow easier vocalization, and the larger cranium development characteristics of the third density needs. So essentially, think about the evolution of ape to man. We lose body hair, our neck, jaw, and forehead change, and our cranial area gets larger so we can have bigger brains. Over approximately how long a period of time was this configuration? It must have been very short. The assumption is correct. Within a generation and a half. Those who had been harvested for this planet were able to use the newly created physical complex of chemical elements suited for the third density lesson. So it took 1.5 generations for it to turn into what it is now. Can you tell me how this new bodily complex was suited to third densities and what third density lessons and what the lessons were? There is one necessity for third density: self-awareness. In order to be capable of this, each body must be capable of abstract thought. The fundamental necessity is the combination of rational and intuitive thinking. Wow. This was transitionary in the second density forms operating largely upon intuition, which proved their practice to yield results. Yield results. So we talk about this a lot as humans, that animals have this intuition. You know, they know when there's an earthquake, they know when there's going to be a storm, they know how to migrate, they just know. That's the intuition. They just know. But what separates the human is having a rational part of the brain, because we have to be able to think abstractly. We have to have an imagination. We have to be able to think about complex things. So that's why our brains need to be bigger. Our body's not necessarily as strong. And, but we're still animals, and we still have that intuition. And that's what a lot of people still use, whether they realize it or not. And people in the woo-woo world have realized that that's a huge part of how we should function in the world, is by relying more on our intuition and a little bit less on our rational brains. Good stuff. I wrote an LOL. Let's see what I was laughing about. The third density mind was capable of processing information in such a way to think abstractly in what you would call useless ways. When it comes to survival, this is the primary requisite. People, this is the primary requisite of being a human, to think about useless stuff. Things that don't have anything to do with surviving. When I start out my school year with my students, or a new semester, when I have a new class of kids, on the very first day of school, I tell them that the thing that separates us from animals is that we all create stuff. A spider creates a web, a bird creates a nest, etc., etc., but they all do it out of survival. The bird has to have a nest to raise its babies. The spider has to make a web so that it has food to eat. But humans make stuff just for the fun of making stuff. It has nothing to do with our survival. We just like to create. And that's exactly what Ra is saying. We make useless shit because that's what we're supposed to do. The uselessness is part of our humanity because it's part of our abstract thought. It's part of us being in the third density. I love it. There are other important ingredients. The necessity for a weaker physical vehicle to encourage the use of the mind. So there you go. We're not nearly as strong as apes because we don't need to be, because we can use our minds instead of our brute force. The development of the already present awareness of the social complex. So realizing that it's important that we have some sort of society, that we work in a group, that we can use each other to guide ourselves along. We need each other. There's also being necessary the further development of physical dexterity and the use of the hand. So we use our hands for everything, right? We have to be able to write, type, tie shoes, the list can go on and on and on. So those were the prerequisites for the third density, the things we needed. We needed a bigger brain. We needed a less physical physique. We needed to have rational thinking. We needed to be able to use abstract thought. And we needed to know that it is important to work together. We have to work together. This seems to be a carefully planned stage of development. Can you tell me anything of the origin of the plan? We go back to the previous information. Consider and remember the discussion of logos. So this word keeps coming up, and Ra uses it as an interchanging word with the word love. But I wanted to see if there was some other description of logos. So it's a Greek word. It means word, thought, principle of speech. But it also can mean logic or reasoning. So it's words, thoughts, and principles of speech and logical reasoning. With the primal distortion of free will, each galaxy developed its own logos. Remember, that's really supposed to be each solar system. This logos has complete free will in determining the paths of intelligent energy which promote the lessons of each of the densities given the conditions of the planetary spheres and the sun bodies. So the makeup of our actual solar system, its planets and sun, or suns in some case, is what determines the paths of the intelligent energy's lessons, and that becomes what the logos is of the free will. But remember that Ra's also using logos as love. Okay. Then Dawn asks, there is a physical catalyst operating at all times upon the entities in third density. I assume this operating approximately the same way in the second density. It's a catalyst that acts through what we call pain and emotion. Is this the primary reason for the weakening of the physical body? So that the catalyst would act more strongly upon the mind and create the evolutionary process. Not entirely correct, although closely associated. Consider, if you will, this is one of Ra's go-to phrases. Consider, if you will, or picture, if you will, the tree, for instance. It is self-sufficient. I'm going to have a sip of my coffee. Consider, if you will, the third density being, entity. It is the self-sufficient only through difficulty and deprivation. Good Lord, thanks for that. It is difficult to learn alone, for there is a built-in handicap, at once the great virtue and the great handicap of third density. That is the rational intuitive mind. We're only self-sufficient through difficulty and deprivation. It's hard to learn alone. Thus, the weakening of the physical vehicle, as you call it, is designed towards a predisposition to deal with each other so that you can bring about the lessons of knowing a love. So it has to begin with each other. We have to work together. This catalyst then is shared between peoples as an important part of each self's development, as well as the experiences of the self in solitude and the synthesis of all experience through meditation or contemplation or prayer. Remember, this is interchangeable. The quickest way to learn is to deal with other selves. The quickest way to learn is to deal with other selves. This is a much greater catalyst than dealing with the self. Dealing with the self without other selves is akin to living without what you call mirrors. Thus, the self cannot see the fruits of its beingness. Thus, each may aid each by reflection. This is also the primary reason for the weakening of the physical vehicle, as you call the physical complex. So I've heard quite a few times over the past couple of years this idea that we are a reflection. We reflect ourselves in others, or others reflect back to us what we are. I'm not saying it correctly. We reflect in others that which we are. I wrote it down. I should have just read it. We reflect in others that which we are. So if you come at someone in an angry way, they're going to be angry back to you. If you come at someone in a loving way, they're going to be loving back to you. This is not always true, but I think that's what it reminded me of. It brought that theory up. The whole mirroring thing. We're reflecting each other. That's really, really evident with children, smaller children, like before preteen age, are very susceptible to that. If you're in a crappy mood, they're going to be in a crappy mood. If you're in a happy, fun, silly mood, they're going to be in a happy, fun, silly mood. Even if you're hiding your anger and frustration, they are going to feel it. I've seen it. I got 3 kids, and I've been a teacher for a long time. That's what happens. They reflect what they see. So, interesting. Then we have second density beings who have motivation towards service to self and possibly a little bit of service to others with respect to their immediate families, going into third density and carrying this bias. So this is Dawn's next question. With them being in this position, now where this bias will slowly be modified to one which is aimed toward a social complex, and then ultimately toward a union with all. Am I correct? Correct. So he's asking, second density beings primarily have a service to self, with a little bit of service to others, but usually with their immediate people, that end up going to third density. And they end up carrying that bias with them and going into the social complex. Ross says that's right. Okay, the next question. It's a long question, and I just underlined the most important parts, but now I'm trying to figure out where to start. I assume then that entity can start in second density with service totally to self and continue right on through and just stay on what you would call the path of service to self and never be pulled over to the service to others. Incorrect. The second density concept of serving self includes the serving of those associated with the tribe or pack. This is not seen in second density as separation of self or others, as seen as a self, since in some forms of second density entities, if the tribe or pack becomes weakened, so does the entity within the tribe or pack. So no, in a second density, there's many animals, particularly, that have to work together. Think about ants, bees, wolves, lots of them have to work together in order to survive, and because they have to work so closely together, they see each other as self. The new or initial third density entity has this innocence or bias or distortion toward viewing those in the family, the society, as self. Thus, through a distortion not helpful for progression in third density, it is without polarity. The break becomes apparent when the entity perceives other selves as other selves and consciously determines to manipulate other selves for the benefit of the self. This is the beginning of the road which you speak. So there is no service to self or service to others in the second density. And usually at the beginning of the third density, it doesn't happen either. It's when the entity makes a conscious decision to manipulate others because they finally see others as other selves. Does an entity consciously choose this path at the initial splitting point? We speak in generalities, which is dangerous, for it's always inaccurate. But the majority of third density beings is far along the chosen path before realization of that path is conscious. So they're not consciously making the decision. They've consciously realized that they're the other selves. They know that other people are other selves. And some point along the line, when they do become conscious of it, they've already been doing it for a long time. Can you tell me what bias creates the momentum towards the path of service to self? We can only speak in metaphor. Some love the light. Some love the darkness. It is a matter of unique and infinitely various. It is a matter of the unique and infinitely various creator choosing and playing among its experiences as a child upon a picnic. Some enjoy the picnic and find the sun beautiful, the food delicious, the games refreshing, and glow with the joy of creation. Some find the night delicious, their picnic being pain, difficulty, suffering of others, and the examination of the perversities of nature. These enjoy a different picnic. That sounds like a really awful picnic. All these experiences are available. It is the free will of each entity to choose the form of play, the form of pleasure. Wow. Some love the light, some love the darkness. And I feel like some people are torn down the middle. Next question. I assume an entity on either path can decide to choose the paths at any time, possibly retrace them, the path changing being more difficult the further along it goes. Incorrect. The further any entity has polarized, the easier the entity may change polarity, for the more power and awareness the entity will have. Those truly helpless are those who have not consciously chosen, but who repeat patterns without knowledge of repetition or the meaning of the pattern. This part is extremely important. So an entity can be completely service to self, be completely conscious that that's what they're doing, and then they can flip the switch and become service to others without any issues, because there's more power and awareness. The more power and awareness an entity has, they can switch with no issues. So they could do the other way around too. The people who are helpless are the ones who repeat patterns without knowledge of the repetition, or that there's meaning in the pattern. How many people have you known in your life? Maybe you've even been one of them at some time, and maybe you're one of them now. Take this message to heart. If you keep having horrible crap happen to you over and over and over again, look at the patterns. There is a pattern. What are you not learning in the lessons? What are you not getting? You have to understand that the reason why bad things continuously happen to you is because there is a reason why it's happening. And until you can figure out the pattern, figure out the meaning, you're just going to be stuck there. And it hurts my soul to watch these people be stuck there because they just don't get it. And for me, I'm like, how can they not see this pattern? But they just haven't got there yet. It's not part of their awareness yet. So yes, this part is really important. Okay, let's continue. All right. To make an analogy, using electricity, we have a positive and negative pole. The more you build the charge on either of these, the greater the potential difference and the greater their ability to do work in the physical. Is this analogy correct as far as consciousness goes? It is precisely correct. So you have to think about it in electricity type of ways, which in the next session, Dawn brings it up again, this analogy of electricity, and I feel like in the next session it made more sense to me. But electricity works with different poles, negative and positive, and it won't work if it doesn't have the negative and the positive. And consciousness is the same way. It doesn't work unless you have the negative and the positive. Next question. Okay, what was the question? The question is, are practically, so what? Okay, I'm just gonna have to read the whole question. Well, this would seem then that there's a relationship between what we perceive as physical phenomenon and conscious phenomenon. Having stemmed from the one creator, are practically identical but have slightly different actions. The physical complex alone has created many energy or electromagnetic fields interacting due to intelligent energy. The mental configurations or distortions of each complex further aiding fields of electromagnetic energy and distorting the physical complex of patterns of energy. The spiritual aspect serving a further complexity of fields, which is of itself perfect, but which may be realized in many distorted and unintegrated ways by the mind and the body complex of the energy fields. Whew, okay. The spirit is perfect, no issues, no distortions, but being filtered through the mind and the body and the electromagnetic fields of our own planet and solar system, it all becomes distorted. Thus, instead of one magnet with one polarity in the mind-body-spirit complex, one basic polarity expressed in what you call the violet energy ray, which is your crown chakra. That's the sum of the energy fields, but which is affected by thoughts of all kinds generated from the mind complex and distortions from the body complex, and by the numerous relationships between the microcosm, the entity, and the macrocosm, the planet, and the stars, each with a contributing energy ray which enters the electromagnetic web of the entity due to its individual distortions. So everything affects us. Our bodies, our minds, our planet, our solar system, and the frickin' stars. And here Dawn says, is this then the root of what we call astrology? The root of astrology is one way of perceiving the primal distortions which may be predicted along probability and possibility lines of cosmic orientations and configurations at the time of entrance into the physical and mental complex of the spirit, and at that time of the physical, mental, spiritual complex into the illusion. So yes, we can predict the probability possibility based on the cosmic orientations and configurations because they are they are giving us some sort of electromagnetic field of distortion. This then has the possibility of suggesting basic areas of distortion. There is no more than this. The part astrology plays is likened unto that of one root among many. Yay! Astrologers and people who like astrology rejoice. Ra just said that it is. It is an area of which you can suggest basic areas of distortion by watching the configurations and of the cosmic celestial bodies and how their what their placement is to each other, what their placement is to us, can absolutely help you predict basic areas of distortion. But it shouldn't be the only thing that you rely on, because there's also the distortions of the mind and the body and the planet, and I would even suggest other selves. That hasn't been mentioned, but the energies of other selves too. So I love that. Ross says it's one root among many. How exciting. Okay, Jim gets a little bit of a reprieve coming up. Just wait. Last two questions. The instrument wanted me to ask if there's any other substances, foods that she should not eat or drink, or anything that she should not do because she does not wish to have poor contact for any reason. Okay, here comes Jim's reprieve. Okay, it wasn't Jim's fault. There is no activity which this instrument engages in which affects its abilities negatively. There is one activity which affects its abilities positively. This is sexual activity. Remember at the very beginning how much crap we gave Jim because we assumed that he suggested that he was the one who suggested that they have sexual activity before they do these sessions? Here we are in session 19. They've been doing this for like a month, more than a month. And Ra is the one who suggested it. I'm sure Jim was not disappointed. Okay, there are substances ingested which do not aid the individual, and one of them is marijuana. This is due to the distortion toward chemical lapses of the mind, causing lack of synaptic continuity. This chemical reaction is of short duration. However, Carla doesn't use that substance, but they want her to know that, well, Carla hasn't used that substance while they've been doing this communicating. But they want her to know that that's something that would be bad because it's, you know. What, man? It causes what? Like synaptic? What are you talking about? Okay. We believe we have covered the use of LSD. This being positive to a certain extent due to the energizing or speeding up of vital forces. However, it's not recommended due to the toll it takes upon the vital energies once the substance wears off. This being true of any speeding up chemical. So it might be really good in the short term, but in the long run, it's not great because it causes vital energies of the person to be lessened once it wears off. And the last thing, they told her to wear some shoes. Apparently, she's still got cold feet. Ay, ay, ay. Okay. So this is an interesting one. And I feel like for the most part, Don has figured out how to not be all over the place. He's not jumping from topic to topic. He's trying to focus in on the evolution of humans through second and third density through the 75,000 years. And so far, he's doing pretty good. So, to review what we learned in this session, we learned that there's 3 types of second density entities: animals, trees, and places. And then we learned about transitioning into the third density from the second density, talked about that more. We also talked about what are the specific differences between a second density body and a third density body. And we also talked about like the ins and outs of getting started in the third density. There was more talk about service to self and service to others, what that means and how that works. And then there was a good discussion about how all the aspects that affect us in distortion and distortions and whatnot. And one of them is astrology. Fun stuff. And this video will be a little bit shorter than the previous ones. I don't know if that's good or bad for you. Some people don't have an hour to watch a video, so the fact that this one is a little bit shorter will probably be a good thing. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. There's tons of videos before this one of these raw book discussions, and there will be a lot more afterwards. We're not quite halfway through. Whew. Okay. I'll be back later with another one. See you later. Bye.